Hello and welcome to episode, I want to say 10 or 11 of the Comic Book Club. Let me make sure. Remember last week when I said that I was going to get on top of that, and now here I am not being on top of it? It's episode 10. Welcome to episode 10 of the Comic Book Club. I am your host, Matt Lasik, and it's just me today. Kendra, our fun friend and usual co-host, Kendra Forte, is not available this week or next week. So today, you're going to have to deal with just me, and we will be taking a break next week. So there will be no episode of the Comic Book Club next week. We're still reading All-Star Superman, but we're pushing it off another week. So 2 weeks from today, we will return, and we will talk about All-Star Superman. But today, you guys get to listen to me, and just me. So today's another chill episode. We've got some headlines we're going to read. We've got user-submitted questions. Some of it is Vision follow-up. If you're listening to this live and you'd like to submit some questions to be answered, you can tweet us at cbbcpod, or you can email us at cbbcpod@gmail.com. With that, let's jump into it. So, last week we read and talked about Tom King's Vision solo series. It was very heavy stuff, very good stuff, but very heavy, very mature. As such, we barely managed to fit it into our allotted time frame. So we've got some listener questions, just asking some stuff to clear up some confusion. First off, this is in relation to the character of Agatha Harkness, who, if you listeners remember, she's a witch. Supposedly, her backstory is that she was one of the original Salem witches from the Salem witch trial, and that she's immortal or some such. I don't know. Okay, I'm just going to read the question. In issue 3, it says, a month ago, Agatha Harkness was dead, which implies that her eating the flower was the death, because she sees the visions of the future, and then she, quote, woke from death screaming. So did she actually die here, or does she die between this moment and when she tells the Avengers about Vision? So, I'm going to jump into some timeline hypothesizing and backstorying, but before I do that, I want to make it clear that with how comics are written, everything I could be saying, Tom King could have just chosen to ignore. And he could have just, decided on something else, and that's why this makes sense. So, just as a disclaimer, everything that I'm about to say, Tom King could have just, again, chosen to be nah, that's not canon. So what I understand the timeline to be, so Agatha Harkness's canonical death happened during the Avengers Disassembled storyline, which was in, I want to say, 2004. Avengers Disassembled covered how Wanda, aka Scarlet Witch, whom Agatha trained in magic. Avengers Disassembled details Wanda losing her sanity and using her very powerful, a combination of her powerful mutant ability to manipulate reality and her magical training to start messing with reality, and it results in the dissolving of the Avengers. But in the process of this, Agatha confronts her, and Wanda kills her. So that is her canonical death. Prior to her ghost appearing in the Vision solo, she around the same time, a little bit before I think, she appears as a ghost in Wanda's solo. So it is established at this point that she is present as a ghost. How I understood the scene in issue 3, because it's clearly a flashback, I understood this to be a flashback to before her death at the hands of Scarlet Witch during Avengers Disassembled. So at some point before her death, she did this whole thing with the flower and the Vision and such. The Vision being the vision of the future, not the Vision, the character. I believe the line, a month ago, Agatha Harkness was dead, means that she is a ghost and therefore not dead. because her eating the flower, I don't believe her eating the flower is her dying, because again, she canonically dies in Avengers Disassembled. And the whole woke from death screaming line, again, I think is a reference to her returning from the dead as a ghost. And once again, either this is the most accurate timeline, or Tom King just chose to change things because that's what comic book writers do. They just kind of choose to change things, and us readers are sort of at their mercy, at their whims, as it were. Another question regarding Vision. I'm reading the question directly. So, does Vision not have any emotions in the story, or has he only purged the emotions connected to past memories? Because why does he have his breakdown about not loving Virginia, that being the robot wife that he built for himself, if he can't love? And why does he feel so protective over his family? I think, so this is referencing both events that happen within the series and a little blurb that happens in sort of the preamble to issue 1, where it says that Vision recently, relative to the events of the story, recently had purged his emotions that are connected to his memories. So what I believe is happening is that Vision still has the capacity to feel human emotions. He has just purged his sort of emotional memory. So he has the sort of factual memory. He has like his data logs of him being a robot and saving the world and such, and he has the a capacity to feel and develop emotion in the present. But since he no longer lacks the emotions that are tied to his memory, I think that is sort of the cause of his internal struggles of how to process the emotions that he is feeling in the present towards his family and his wife, because he lacks the groundwork to build upon, so to speak. With that covered, let's move into more general questions from our audience. We've got one coming in asking. Let me pull it up real quick. I had it pulled up and then the page refreshed and I lost it, so I apologize. Let's see here. Where's this question? I swear I had this. I have scrolled past it. I apologize for this. I know this is boring. Here we go. I found it. Okay. Why did Marvel feel it necessary to reveal Spider-Man's identity at the end of Far From Home? Far From Home being the, I think it's the last MCU movie that was released before the pandemic kind of ruined the movie industry. Why did Marvel feel it necessary to reveal Spider-Man's identity at the end of Far From Home? I thought in the comics his identity was always kept secret. Well, we covered this in the past on a past episode, but I'll briefly reiterate. I actually have been I'm in the middle of rereading the 2005-2006 event Civil War, which is the first event. It's the first comic book depiction of Spider-Man having his identity publicly revealed. So there is sort of a precedent for Spider-Man's identity being public, but sort of one of the main plot threads of that event is it immediately goes poorly for him. Like his friends and family are targeted, and he ends up actually changing sides against. So in this event, Iron Man is pro registration and public identities, and Captain America is anti-registration and public identities. So one of the big midpoints of the series is Spider-Man changing sides after his life kind of goes to crap after he publicly comes out with his identity. So there is a precedence. In the comics, he uses, I believe it's a combination of like a spell from Doctor Strange and a deal with the literal devil to sort of rewrite history and erase his identity from the public knowledge. So there's two ways that the third Spider-Man movie could go. It could go with the magic thing, or it could go with sort of like a lawyer thing, like get Peter Parker in court, have him argue that he's not Spider-Man, yada, yada, yada. With the rumors that have been flying around, those rumors being that the previous two actors that played Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, supposedly they've been signed on to the project, it's leaning towards a more magic focused storyline. But nothing's really. I don't think anything's really been officially confirmed yet. I will do some quick Googling to double check that to see if any official details have come out regarding the sequel, but I don't believe anything has. Let's see here. Sequel. August 2019. Yes, so it does not look like anything has been hard confirmed for like the other Spider-Man coming back, although it has been confirmed that Jamie Foxx will be playing Electro again, and he did appear in Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man movies, and it has been confirmed that Doctor Strange is appearing, which does again indicate that they're leaning towards sort of the magic undoing for the plot line. But a lot of it still remains to be seen. So I will leave it at that. Next question. Who do you think is the most underrated superhero, or one you think deserves more attention in comics, movies, etc.? I'll name both my candidates for Marvel and my candidates for DC. For Marvel, normally I'd say Moon Knight, but he's actually been getting a lot more representation lately. He's gotten his own, he's gotten his own Disney Plus series that's already been confirmed. They've already got casting done for it, so I'm excited for that. And he recently was the focal point of an Avengers storyline, so he's honestly doing fine in terms of him getting a spotlight. Underrated superhero. I really like Iron Fist, and I hate what they did with him in the Netflix series. I think it's awful. So it would be nice to see him come back. He also hasn't really been seen much in the comic books lately. Let's see here. Deadpool's doing fine in terms of representation. He's got 2 great movies, and hopefully will eventually be integrated into the MCU. So nothing to say there. In terms of DC, Green Lantern. We're going to talk more about that because I have a couple headlines regarding Green Lantern, but just like the entire Green Lantern core and the different separate. Green Lantern is both multiple characters with the codename Green Lantern and sort of a universal police force named the Green Lantern Corps, of which each separate Green Lantern is a member of. We'll get more into them when we get to headlines because I actually, again, do have headlines regarding them. But it would be nice to see him appear more in things. Also in DC, possibly one of my favorite superheroes, no, definitely one of my favorite superheroes, is Booster Gold. And I think, first of all, he hasn't appeared in the comics in years, and he hasn't had his own ongoing in even more years. And other than like a couple of kids animated shows, he hasn't appeared in anything live action other than like Smallville, which for those of you who don't know is a TV show that ran for a long time that depicts Superman's years growing up as like a teenager or whatever. So Booster Gold is from like the 30th. He's from somewhere very far in the future. I think the 30th century, and he was initially a college football star quarterback who bet on himself and was sort of. It got revealed to the public, and he lost all of his the how do you say it? The public support that he had gained over the years as a football player. So he was instead relegated to working a menial job as a security guard at like a superhero museum. So while he was in there, he stole a couple of things from the museum. First of all, he stole a time machine, and he also stole a ring that granted him flight, as well as gauntlets and a bodysuit that granted him a force field and the ability to like shoot force beams. And with those things, he traveled back to the 20th century to make a name for himself as a hero. Now, in his first couple appearances, for a while, he was, honestly, he was sort of a joke, because, like, his whole shtick was that he was only a hero to make money. So, like, you know, he'd get endorsements, and he'd, like, be in commercials, and he'd plaster his suit with, like, brand logos. But over the years, he grew more nuance to his characters, especially in the miniseries 52, wherein he took a role sort of as like a time cop. So like he'd travel the timeline and hop universe to universe to sort of fix irregularities in the time stream. And his story took on a bit of like a bittersweet thing, because to ensure that those irregularities would stay fixed, and that like no time villain would go back and change them, he had to maintain his image amongst the superhero community as like a money grubbing, sponsored playboy, whatever. So his motto for a while was like the greatest superhero that you've never heard of, and I really like it. I really recommend both 52 and Booster Gold's ongoing, which we might cover in the future one day. But yes, that would be my vote for the most underrated DC superhero. A close second would be Blue Beetle. For a while, Booster Gold and Blue Beetle were like a duo. Now, there's been multiple people to hold the name Blue Beetle, the most recent being Jaime Reyes, and he got extensive screen time in the Young Justice TV show and a couple of DC animated movies. But his predecessor was a man by the name of Ted Kord, and he didn't have any superpowers. He was like your Batman or your Tony Stark, where he just kind of built gadgets with his multi-billion-dollar tech corporation and fought crime that way. But for a while there was a Justice League series titled Justice League International, and that had sort of more of a focus on it was like an action comedy. And Blue Beetle and Booster Gold were most often either the butt of the jokes or the ones making the jokes. So it was very endearing. I do also want to cover Justice League International one day on this show. So it would be cool to see Blue Beetle and or Booster Gold represented more. Moving on. What other questions do we got? Another question coming in asking about the next Thor movie, subtitled Love and Thunder. What are my thoughts, and how do I think it will be? I think it'll be, I'm thinking it'll be fun. It's sort of another space jaunt, because Thor is now part of like the Guardians of the Galaxy. Is Taika Waititi doing that one again? I'm going to look that up. I hope the best thing for that movie will be if it's similar enough in like the vibes to Thor Ragnarok, but also different enough from Thor Ragnarok that it's not just like a carbon copy, you know? Because that's sort of the thing of like, take like Guardians of the Galaxy versus Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Very similar vibes, but Guardians of the Galaxy 2 tried to like copy the first one in certain ways, or like amp up small details that made the first one fun that became like overwhelming in the sequel that made it not fun. See, for an example, Drax's character. But I'm hoping that Love and Thunder will be fun. One of the big inspirations that they seem to be taking is we'll get into this. So a couple years ago, Marvel did this thing where like they tried to sort of increase the diversity of their superhero cast. So they changed a lot. They sort of all of like the older white men that had the names either got like incapacitated in one way or another, and there was like a younger wave of heroes that used the same name. So like Falcon, who is a black man, took on the role of Captain America. There was a new Hulk who was like a young Asian American man. Miles Morales came in as Spider-Man. Ms. Marvel became a young, I believe, Pakistani American. And the most notable one that a lot of people got stuck in their craws was that a new female Thor appeared. The male Thor was still around, but he was no longer worthy, and someone else came and picked up the hammer and became a female Thor. And again, a lot of people didn't like that. I thought it was great, but nerds don't like change. So eventually it was revealed that this new female Thor was secretly Thor's old love interest. Now I'm blanking on her name. This is the big reveal, and I can't remember. Jane Foster, that's what it was. The big reveal was that female Thor was actually Jane Foster. And judging by the fact that Natalie Portman has been slated to appear in Love and Thunder in the role of Jane Foster, suggests that they are going to implement that storyline in one way or another. Or at least I'm hoping they do. That'd be cool. But yes, maybe we'll see Natalie Portman as Thor. Interesting. I googled Love and Thunder, and there's actually a new headline 10 hours ago. Thor Love and Thunder will have a, quote, Avengers 5 feel. Whatever that means. I wonder if we'll get like a... I always refer to Captain America 3 Civil War as like Avengers 2.5 because it's basically an Avengers movie. So I wonder if we'll get something similar there. I believe that's all the listener questions right now. Again, if you want to send yours in and have me maybe answer them live on air, you can tweet us at cbbcpod or email us at cbbcpod@gmail.com. Let's move on to headlines. First and foremost, since I talked about it earlier with Green Lantern, Green Lantern's getting an HBO Max series, which is fun. I'll take this moment to just briefly go over Green Lantern. Like I mentioned earlier, the Green Lantern Corps is sort of like a intergalactic space force. Their main distinguishing feature is a power ring, which is green, hence Green Lantern. And they are fueled by the emotion of will. So to join the Green Lantern Corps, you have to prove that you have the ability to overcome great fear. So there have been a number of human Green Lanterns, and that's usually what the comic book focuses on. According to this article from comicbook.com, apparently the HBO Max Green Lantern series will focus specifically on Guy Gardner, who is, I believe, third. He'd be the third human to take on the name of Green Lantern, who is sort of very, very stereotypically masculine, very gung ho. He's like a football quarterback mixed with like a Rambo type guy, I guess. He's just very like hyper patriotic and stuff. But he's usually the writers will also make him like actually sympathetic and likable, because I know the character that I just described sounds god awful. But trust me, guys, he's a fun character. And it will also supposedly focus on Alan Scott, who was the first character to be named Green Lantern. He was a Golden Age character. This is going to be okay. So Alan Scott is not associated with the Green Lantern Corps. He is instead powered by a mystical power source named the Starheart. So he's not in any way associated with the Green Lantern Corps. Some writers have put in like the caveat that like, oh, the Starheart was like the precursor. It was like an experiment done by the leaders of the Green Lantern Corps, who, by the way, are named the Guardians. They're like, oh, the Guardians created the Starheart, so like Alan Scott is technically whatever. But usually he's not like in any way associated to the Green Lantern Corps. So that's a pretty major change for this HBO Max series. Alan Scott is also notable for being one of the few gay comic book characters. That's actually, I think that was that is a recent change. Like they changed that in like 2011. But apparently he's also going to be featured in this series, along with a new character named Bree Jarta, I almost said something that would not come off well. A black woman. Bree Jarta is going to be a black woman and apparently a new inductee to the Green Lantern Corps. So excited for that. I personally don't have an HBO Max subscription, but I'm sure I can find a friend to bum it off of. I will definitely be watching that. I want to transition to talking about a man by the name of Jeff Johns. He was a writer in the comic book industry. He was for a while he was a very important figure in DC. I believe he was like head creative something, chief creative officer. That was his title. He was the chief creative officer of DC for a while, and he is sort of like almost single-handedly responsible for reviving Green Lantern, because in the 90s, the Green Lantern Corps was basically destroyed and reduced to one guy. And then Jeff Johns, like a couple of years later, in like the mid 2000s, Jeff Johns came in and rebirthed the whole franchise, restarted the core, reintroduced old characters and new characters, and had possibly my favorite run on any comic book ever. Jeff Johns' run on Green Lantern is incredible. Amazing. We'll probably cover bits and pieces of it on the show in the future, but it really, just really incredible. He also had his hand on writing for Aquaman and I think Wonder Woman, maybe Wonder Woman 1984. Let me see here. He was producer for Wonder Woman and executive producer for Aquaman, Shazam, Birds of Prey, and Wonder Woman 1984, as well as writing on Aquaman and Wonder Woman 1984. The big news with him, the headline, coming from, where'd that headline go? Coming from The Hollywood Reporter, Jeff Johns moves to Image Comics for Geiger. So the big news is that Jeff Johns has left his position at DC Entertainment like just a couple weeks ago, and he is instead going to work with Image Comics, which is probably the biggest independent comic producer, to write a series called Geiger. Not much is known about the series except that it's set after a nuclear war almost destroys Earth. But I will definitely be reading that because Jeff Johns is one of my favorite writers in the business. So I look forward to that. Next headline, moving on. Let's see here. Pulling up a headline. Narrating myself. Pulling up a headline. This comes from CNN. Latink's character lands DC Comics Wonder Woman role and new TV series. So this is referring to something we've talked about a couple weeks ago, that being DC's upcoming Future State event, which will sort of replace a lot of characters and see them sort of passing their code name on to new characters. This one specifically, Wonder Woman will be going to a new character by the name of Yara Flor. And apparently, before any of her comics even come out, it's already been confirmed that she's getting a TV show, which is fun. Let's see here. Oh, of course. It's on the CW, which should be no surprise. CW has hosted like half a dozen DC TV shows. Arrow, The Flash, Supergirl, Legends of Tomorrow, Black Lightning, Stargirl for a brief period of time, I think. So I am fully unsurprised that this new Wonder Woman series is going on the CW. Speaking of Wonder Woman, this is a pretty large headline. It has been announced that Wonder Woman 1984, that being the sequel to Wonder Woman, will be released on HBO Max and theaters on, I believe, December 25th. So no need to go to theaters to see that. They are putting it directly on HBO Max on the same day with no extra charge, December 25th. So that's exciting news. Wonder Woman 1984 is one of those movies that has just been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back due to COVID. So good. It's good to hear that is, being available to the public. In related news, New Mutants was just put onto digital services. It's not streaming anywhere, but you can buy it. I want to talk about this for a while because New Mutants is okay. So in the comics, New Mutants came out of they're an X-Men subsidiary, I should say. So at one point in the comics, the sort of main X-Men team went off into space and sort of disappeared for a while. And in their stead, Professor X recruited a new generation of students that were teenagers and sort of put them on a team, and they were called the New Mutants. So this movie is based off of that. New Mutants is sort of the movie that is sort of a sob story in the industry, because that thing had been in production since 2017, 2018. but it wasn't released until 2020. Let me see here. Yes, so filming started in 2017, and it was going to be released in April 2018, but then it was delayed because of the Disney acquisition of 20th Century Fox, and then it was delayed again because of the COVID pandemic, and then it released very limitedly in August of 2020 to almost no one going to see it, and apparently it isn't even that great, which is unfortunate, because I have been excited for this movie since it was announced in like 2016, because the whole concept is that it's a superhero movie but also a horror movie, and I was very intrigued by that concept of a superhero horror movie. So I will probably still watch it eventually, but I am disappointed that the reviews are poor, so to speak. Let's see here. Other headline. This is a fun follow-up that I saved a while ago. If you remember in our second episode, if you can remember all the way back, I complained heavily about Activision's, Disney's, Marvel's, whatever's, the Avengers. This headline comes from cosmicbook.news. Marvel's Avengers loses 96% of players. Ay. Things are just not great for this game. It released incredibly buggy and honestly boring. If you want to hear more thoughts, go back and listen to episode 2 where I talked about it in depth, but it is not surprising that it has lost the vast majority of its player base. I still intend to go back to it someday and at least finish the story and probably mess around with like the DLC characters, because at this point it's announced that Hawkeye and SpiderMan are being added into the game, and they also confirmed that Kate Bishop, who was one of the characters named Hawkeye, will also be added to the game. What I'm not clear on is whether they're adding both Hawkeyes, that being Clint Barton and Kate Bishop, into the game, or just Kate Bishop. That is sort of unclear to me. Let's see what the Wikipedia article has to say. Okay, so it looks okay, so they are going to add in both Hawkeyes, and Black Panther and War Machine have also been teased to be added in afterwards. War Machine, of course, being I guess a subsidiary. I don't want to call him, I don't know, Iron Man's sidekick, I guess, because he's sort of his own character, but just for people who may not know. So, I really wanted this game to be good, and they're constantly churning out like updates and patches and stuff. So I'm hoping one day it will be good, but I don't think it is right now. But I'm holding out hope. I'm remaining hopeful. Let's see. Next headline. This one comes from Screen Rant, who we ping very commonly for questions. Or for headlines, rather. If Nightcrawler wasn't a mutant, he'd be Marvel's most popular hero. For listeners who don't know, Kurt Wagner, a.k.a. Nightcrawler, is my favorite X-Man. He is great. His mutation is such that he has the power to teleport, but he also kind of looks like a demon. Like, he's got, 3 fingers and 3 toes on each foot, and he's got, a pointed tail and fangs, and he's got fur all over his body, and the fur is, bright blue. But he's funny, he's kind, he's like a swashbuckler type personality, and he's just great, okay? I just love him. And I believe what this article is saying, that his demonic appearance and him, being a mutant and such, I think we talked about this on an earlier episode, but mutants in the Marvel Universe are pretty much an allegory for any minority that you want, really. So mutants in the Marvel Universe are not at all treated well, so I believe what this article is trying to get across, that if he were not a mutant and just like a normal dude, then he would come to the forefront in universe, which I agree with. Nightcrawler hasn't really been used much in recent X-Men comics, which is a shame. Love to see more of him. Actually, going back, I'd probably add him to to my list of underrated superheroes that I kind of was talking about earlier. Let's see, what other headlines we got? This one's a listicle coming from our frenemies at CBR. 10 ways Flashpoint changed the DC universe for the better. So we've talked about this. This is a topic that we discuss a lot on the show, the Flashpoint and the New 52. If you want to hear more about that, I don't really want to go into a lot of detail. Just very quickly, Flashpoint was an event that significantly changed every character in the DC universe and birthed the New 52 line of comics, which was sort of a hard reset for the universe. If you want to hear more about that, listen to one of our past episodes. I believe it's called like Robins and Timelines of Maya or something like that, where we go into it a lot more detail. So let's just jump into this listicle and see what CBR thinks has improved the DC universe. Number 10, simplified continuity. This was definitely the main point behind the scenes of the New 52. I guess I would say that they succeeded in that regard. New 52 comics are definitely more simple in terms of like history, but I don't think that that's positive. I really do think that was a detriment to the storytelling because they had to reintroduce so many characters and so many concepts. And it just kind of like it's like how in like every Batman movie you have to watch Martha and Thomas getting shot again, you know? Just wasted page space. Let's see here. Number 9, Cyborg got promoted to the Justice League. This I agree with. Prior to New 52, Cyborg had always been a Teen Titans character. But in the New 52, they put him on the Justice League, along with the character Shazam, and I do appreciate that. I think that Cyborg was sort of he was an adult and he was hanging out on a team called the Teen Titans, so that was kind of weird. But yes, I do appreciate them putting Cyborg with the big leagues. Number 8, a younger Barry Allen. So Barry Allen is, of course, the secret identity of the Flash. He was the focal point of Flashpoint. Obviously, it's named Flashpoint. I don't agree with this. I think that one of the very strong points of the Flash line of comics is the Flash family. So I think that sort of making Barry young and inexperienced and erasing his support structure, I don't like that change. That was not a change that I liked. Number 7, Steve Trevor returns to prominence. So anyone who has watched the Wonder Woman movie will know that Steve Trevor is the name of Wonder Woman's boyfriend. And he, prior to Flashpoint, he had not been seen for a while. But in the New 52, he was brought back as a very important role. He served, I believe, as like the liaison between the Justice League and the U.S. government. Sort of like their analog to Nick Fury, and like made him important again. I'm sort of ambivalent to that. Like, you know, I guess I neither agree nor disagree. I just acknowledge that it was a change that they did. Number 6, new stories with Barbara Gordon as Batgirl. I severely disagree with this, and we talked about this on previous episodes. And this is a change that they recently undid, but prior to Flashpoint, Barbara Gordon had been in a wheelchair for decades, serving as the Oracle, and there had been 2 new Batgirls, both of which I think are just more fun in the role. Again, very recently they made Barbara Oracle again, and they reinstated Cassandra Brown and the other one. God, I hate my brain. God. Okay, I'm Googling this instead of just whining on air about how I can't remember her name. Let's see here. Sorry. You know why I forgot their names? It's because I mixed them together. The 2 other Batgirls were Cassandra Cain and Stephanie Brown, who I think are both more interesting in that role. But they have, again, recently they have both been reinstated as co-Batgirls, and Barbara has returned to the Oracle role. Number 5, Harley Quinn joins the Suicide Squad. This is also, what they don't say is that this is also, New 52 also put Harley down the road of her breaking up with the Joker. So I agree that this was a positive change. I think Harley Quinn not tied to the Joker is a much more interesting character than Harley Quinn tied to the Joker. Number 4, Wonder Woman's new mythology. This is referencing that I believe previous to the New 52, Wonder Woman was she was birthed from like a clay doll that was given the gift of life or something. And in New 52, she is changed to be the daughter of Zeus. This is another change that I'm ambivalent to. I think that the story surrounding this changes what writer Brian Azzarello did with his interpretations of the Greek pantheon is definitely more interesting, but I think that sort of the change to Wonder Woman's origin isn't that much of a difference. Number 3, embracing DC's dark side. Ooh. This was definitely a divisive change in the community. A lot of fans did not like how dark the DC stories had gotten, how like kind of jaded and broken all the characters was. I don't know why CBR is saying this is a positive thing. This is another change that I'm ambivalent to because, you know, I think good stories can be told regardless of how positive or negative they are. I just, you know, I don't think how positive the story is sort of affects the quality of storytelling. Number 2, villains take the spotlight. Yeah, so this was a big event towards the beginning of New 52, the event titled Forever Evil, which featured like all of the villains sort of banding together and taking the spotlight of the DC universe. I thought that this gave a platform for a lot of villains to become more three-dimensional and have more significant stories. So I agree that this was a positive change. Number 1, Scott Snyder takes over Batman and shapes the future of the DC universe. So this is in reference to Scott Snyder writing for Batman for a very long time. He also wrote a lot of like the big crossover events. If you want to hear more about Scott Snyder's work on Batman, you can check out our earlier episodes where we cover his first major storyline. I believe it is one of our most viewed episodes. I like it. So check that out for more on that. Obviously, this is when I agree with that Scott Snyder was a godsend for the New 52. Most, if not all, of his work is fantastic. So that's it for headlines. I've got, I think, 2 more questions that rolled in while I was doing that. And then we'll jump into sort of a short prep for, I guess, our next episode, which will be in 2 weeks. We're just going to sort of briefly talk about Superman's origins, or sort of what you need to know before jumping into All-Star Superman. Quick question. Care to explain more upon your feelings for the Teen Titans Go show compared to the original Teen Titans show? Yeah, so Teen Titans was a TV show in the early to mid 2000s, and it was an action comedy that wasn't afraid to sort of be darker and more serious. It had overarching storylines and character development, which I just think makes for a good show. Teen Titans Go, on the other hand, was a reboot that simplified and lightened the art style a lot. It was still an action comedy, but the focus was definitely shifted hard more onto comedy. There were no more overarching storylines. There was no more character development. It was just funny thing happens, set back to status quo, next episode begins. Which is just sort of like the change of children's TV show, I think. It happened with like Powerpuff Girls and like Ben 10 and other stuff, where shows that were once more serious and sort of expected the viewers to be able to understand and process more serious storylines were just simplified and jokeified and memeified, which I think is just a detriment to entertainment. Let's see here. What other questions we got? What are Black Widow's origins in the comics? This is because she's getting her movie soon. So very briefly, Black Widow was a secret agent for the Russian government. She was raised from a child by an organization called the Red Room, which is like how do I describe it? The Red Room was a location and an organization that took people and trained them to be like super spies and super killers, like from a very young age. So Black Widow is a graduate from the Red Room. She was initially a villain. I think she may have worked for Hydra for a bit, or she might have just worked for the Russian government. But eventually she became a hero, and from there she was just a hero. So that's just very briefly Black Widow's origins. They're probably going to expand on that more in the upcoming movie, whenever it is that that's released. But that's that. Let's see here. Oh, here's an interesting question. So Scarlet Witch, who we've been talking about a lot the past couple of weeks, is the sister to Quicksilver, a mutant with super speed. This question asks, there are two different versions of him in the movies. One is with the X-Men and one with the Avengers, but the Avengers one is dead. So how do you think it would work if those ever merge? So this this is fun. There were at one point two concurrent Quicksilvers, because the Fox X-Men movies had their Quicksilver and the Marvel MCU movies had their Quicksilver. And, there's all these talks and speculations of the Fox X-Men movies and the Marvel MCU movies merging, but of course that raises the questions, what do you do with Quicksilver? I will say, it's very simple now that the MCU Quicksilver has died. They could just the Fox Quicksilver was only appeared in like the flashback movies that took place in like the 70s and 80s and stuff. So it could be said that like it was like just a throwaway line of like, oh well, MCU Quicksilver was inspired by, or like his name was like taken from some mutant that we heard about in the past, yada yada yada, to like clarify that they're two separate beings. But again, I just don't know. There hasn't been anything about any sort of merging, like any, facts that have been confirmed about anything. So, I really don't know. I can't say. I can only speculate. With that, let's move on to our prep discussion. Let's talk about Superman. So, in 2 weeks, we will be discussing Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman. As we talked about last week, Morrison... they have a habit of just kind of throwing new stuff and new characters at the reader without much explanation. So you just kind of have to pay attention to what they tell you as well as context clues. So I can't, obviously I can't prep you for that because that'll just be spoilers. But I will briefly talk about Superman and his origins and power sets and like some of his supporting cast that play important roles in this series. Superman, aka Clark Kent, aka Kal-El, is one of the few remaining survivors from the planet of Krypton, which is one space sector over from Earth. His race, I believe, sort of mined their planet into hell to the point where it self-destructed. So his scientist parents, his father Jor-El, sent him in a spaceship to Earth as a baby, where he crash-landed in the town of Smallville, Kansas, and was found and raised by John and Martha Kent, and he was given the name Clark Kent. Eventually, he left Smallville and became a journalist in the city of Metropolis for the publication of the Daily Planet, where he met his future wife, Lois Lane, as well as his friends Jimmy Olsen, who is a photographer and reporter. Depending on the writer, he's also a part of like a massive family fortune. I don't think that comes up in All-Star Superman, but Jimmy Olsen is like the fun younger brother type of guy, always willing to rush into danger and like take pictures and stuff. Superman gave him a special watch that can signal him wherever he is that like Jimmy's in trouble. Also at the Daily Planet is Perry White, their publisher, sort of that equivalent to the J. Jonah Jameson archetype, like sort of grumpy boss with like a heart of gold and everything. I believe that's all the sort of... there's other like minor characters that appear at the Daily Planet, but I don't think they really play that much of a role. The ones that I named just now definitely play more of a role. Lois Lane is, of course, a reporter, a very good reporter in her own right. She's like she's a strong character, very multifaceted, definitely like one of the best written female comic book characters, because that's usually a thing that comic book authors have an issue with, is writing good female characters. Superman's power set, his Kryptonian cells are they process solar energy differently. So Krypton's sun was a red star. So the people on Krypton did not really have any special abilities. But under Earth's yellow sun, Superman gains a bevy of superpowers. Super strength, invulnerability, flight, heat vision, super breath, which just means he can like breathe really hard and freeze things, super hearing, telescopic vision, etc., etc. The list goes on. But if he's exposed to sort of like the red spectrum of light, then his powers can be drained. Heat vision also drains his sort of solar reserves quicker than his other powers. He is also weak to the material Kryptonite, which are the sort of shattered remains of his home planet that have become irradiated. The most common form is green Kryptonite, which both saps his powers and poisons him over time. That's sort of the surefire way to kill a Kryptonian is just long-term exposure to green Kryptonite. But there's other colors of Kryptonite that appear. There's like red Kryptonite, which can scramble their DNA or something. There's like gold Kryptonite, which can permanently remove a Kryptonian's powers. And these different forms of Kryptonite, it's just like, it's like different isotopes or whatever of Kryptonite. They do appear in this series, which is why I'm mentioning them, of course. Another sort of lesser-known weakness is that Superman's X-ray vision cannot penetrate lead, obviously because X-rays usually cannot penetrate lead. I don't know if that's like a weakness per se, but it's there. Superman is also more susceptible to magic. It's like just like a weird weakness he has that his like invulnerability and everything usually doesn't handle magical attacks very well. So keep an eye out for that, I guess. In terms of villain, there is, of course, Lex Luthor, who, actually, most people don't know this. Lex Luthor was also a resident of Smallville growing up. Lex Luthor is like a super genius, multi-billionaire, business conglomerate, yada, yada, yada. He builds things, he hires people, he gets angry at Superman. Just your, this is Superman we're talking about. Y'all know who Lex Luthor is. Superman and Lex Luthor are like the archetype for every brains versus brawn matchup there is. Who else do we got? Parasite makes an appearance. He has the power to sort of absorb power. Depending on the writer, it has to be, sometimes it's through contact, sometimes you can just like absorb ambient power and sort of juice up from that. Let me think. What other villains make an appearance? A lot of All-Star Superman just sort of focuses on Lex Luthor, to be fair. There's also Bizarro, which Bizarro is a character that changes a lot. Sometimes he is a faulty clone of Superman, usually made by Lex Luthor. Sometimes he is a version of Superman from a different timeline. But Bizarro is just like a reverse Superman. That's sort of the thing to know about Bizarro. Let's see. I think that's... I can't... At the moment, I'm trying to... It's been a while since I've reread All-Star Superman, so at the moment I cannot think of any other villains that make an appearance that I should name, that aren't like new characters that Grant Morrison made. When Superman is not at the Daily Planet or with Lois, he usually hangs out in his Fortress of Solitude, which is a crystalline structure based off of like Kryptonian architecture in, I think, the North Pole. It's usually locked in some way that only Superman can open it. So like usually it's just like a giant heavy key that only he can open, but it's like filled with remnants from Krypton that he's found, like his rocket, and there's like a statue of his parents. It's staffed by robot duplicates. I try to say duplicate and replica at the same time. It's staffed by Superman robots that sort of just maintain the place. It's where Superman like harbors refugees from other planets and like does investigations and such, etc., etc. His home base. It's I feel kind of ridiculous stating a lot of this stuff because some of this has become so well known that it's just like entered modern vernacular. It's like, I'm going back to my Fortress of Solitude, So I'm debating how much of this is like required for me to just state out loud and how much of this is I should just trust you guys to know already. There is also, what else is important? There's another dimension called the Phantom Zone, which was first discovered by Kryptonian researchers. It's sort of like a pocket dimension where time doesn't really flow that solidly, and how do I say it? Like things are like more ephemeral and incorporeal. They're just like they're phantom-like, you know. And that is usually where Superman will send the enemies that can either like not be reformed or are too powerful for Earth prisons. There's a lot of it's also where like the majority of Kryptonian survivors are, because there's a lot of like Kryptonian criminals that were put there while Krypton was still a thing. So it's like that's kind of a sad facet of the Phantom Zone, is that Superman's like, well, here's the largest gathered population of survivors, but they're all bloodthirsty criminals. Speaking of gathered populations of survivors, I don't think it makes an appearance in All-Star Superman, but I could be wrong. The Bottle City of Kandor. So there is another Superman villain named Brainiac, who is an artificial intelligence that is obsessed with collecting things. Usually what he'll do is he'll show up at a planet, choose a random city, shrink it down, put it in a bottle, then destroy the planet and be like, well, now I am the only person that has the only remaining like knowledge of that planet. So prior to Krypton's destruction, Brainiac stole the city of Kandor. Eventually Superman would recover it, but he has yet to figure out how to unshrink it, so now it just has a bottle city full of Kryptonians hanging around. Other Kryptonian survivors, there is, I'm going to say this out loud, and I know it's going to sound ridiculous, but Superman's child, like the family dog, survived the destruction of Krypton. So there's a super dog named Crypto that sometimes hangs out. Yes, that's real. His cousin Supergirl, who is when Superman was a baby, Supergirl was like a teenager, and they both were jettisoned from the planet at the same time. But Supergirl got stuck in like some weird temporal black hole thing, so she landed on Earth like decades after Superman, but was still a teenager, hence Supergirl. Again, I don't remember if she appears in All-Star Superman, but she is worth mentioning. Let's see, what else can't be gathered from context clues? Let's see here. Lex Luthor I covered, Kryptonite I covered, the whole lead thing I covered. This is another very heavy and mature series that takes a lot of sort of close reading and introspection. There's also great art and like funny bits and great action. But yeah, I really like All-Star Superman. They also adapted it into a animated movie a while back, which I think is a pretty faithful adaptation, so you could watch that instead. In closing, thank you so much for listening to the Comic Book Club. Reminder, we will not have an episode next week, but we will return in December. If you want to contact us, you can tweet us at CBBCPod. That's at CBBCPOD for questions, suggestions, comments, anything. You can also email us at cbbcpod@gmail.com. Also, quick business note, moving forward, the recordings of these episodes will now be put up Wednesday mornings as opposed to Tuesday nights. With that, I will see you in 2 weeks. And until then, Excelsior!